All right, let's get right into it. We've all heard them, right? Those wild conspiracy theories. But what is it, psychologically, that makes someone believe? To really get to the heart of it, we're going to look at one of the biggest and honestly one of the most entertaining pop culture conspiracies of all time.
I mean, can you imagine? This was a real question that absolutely consumed the world in the late 1960s. It sounds totally bonkers to us now, but at the peak of Beatlemania, literally millions of fans were convinced that Paul McCartney had secretly died and been replaced by a body double. This wasn't just some fringe idea, it was a global phenomenon, and it's the perfect case study for us to unpack today.
You gotta love it. Even Paul himself had to weigh in, and you can just hear that classic dry wit in his response. But really, back in 1969, this was not a joke for a lot of people. So where on earth did a story this huge even come from?
Okay, so first up, let's trace how this thing exploded. It's a pretty wild ride that starts with this one core idea and then just spirals into this massive hunt for clues and hidden messages that completely captivated a generation. So here's the story they told. Paul, in a fit of anger, storms out of a recording session, gets into a horrific car crash, and dies. To stop the world from collapsing into grief, the other Beatles and their manager secretly hire a lookalike, a guy named William Billy Shears, supposedly the winner of a Paul McCartney lookalike contest. But, overcome with guilt, they decide to sprinkle clues into their music and their album art, little breadcrumbs for the most devoted fans to follow. And this is Exhibit A, the iconic Abbey Road cover. To a believer, this wasn't just four friends crossing the street. No, this was a funeral procession. You've got John in all white, he's the priest. Ringo, in black, is the undertaker. George, in his work jeans, is the gravedigger. And Paul, well, he's barefoot and out of step with everyone else because he's the corpse. And get this, that VW Beetle in the back? The license plate reads 28IF, meaning Paul would have been 28 if he'd lived.
The clues just kept piling up. On the SGP Peppers album, fans swore that the patch on Paul's arm read OPD, for officially pronounced dead. He's also holding a black instrument, while the others have shiny brass ones. Another sign, they said, that he's different, that he's gone. The reality? That patch was from the Ontario Provincial Police, so it actually said OPP. But in the world of the conspiracy, that didn't matter one bit.
And then things got really spooky. A DJ in Detroit got a call from a listener telling him to play the weird experimental track Revolution 9 backwards. He put it on the air, and when that repeated phrase, number 9, was reversed, people heard a chilling, ghostly voice saying, "Turn me on, dead man." And that was it. This idea of backmasking just exploded. Fans were at home spinning all their records in reverse, desperate to find the next secret.
So you can see the clues are pretty creative, right? But the really big question is, why were people so willing to believe it all? Now we're going to pivot from the what to the why, and dig into the fascinating psychology that makes our brains work this way.
You know, psychologists tell us there are basically two different thinking styles at play here. You've got your analytic thinkers. They're skeptical, they focus on the hard facts. But then you have intuitive thinkers. Their brains are wired to see the big picture, to find patterns, to connect the dots. It's that intuitive, gut-feeling style that looks at an album cover and sees a whole funeral procession instead of just, four guys crossing a street.
There's also this personality trait called schizotypy. And look, this is a spectrum that we're all on. It's not a disorder. People who score a bit higher on this trait tend to be more open to magical thinking. And here's the key part. They have what scientists call hyperactive agency detection. That's a fancy way of saying they're more likely to see a deliberate plan, an agency, behind a random event. So a coincidence isn't just a coincidence, it's a clue. An accident isn't just an accident, it's a cover-up.
So what does the research say about who's more likely to go down these rabbit holes? Well, a few things tend to pop up again and again. People who believe often have a higher level of general mistrust, not just of the government, but of people in general. They also tend to report feeling powerless in their own lives, and they're often more open to other outside-the-box ideas, like paranormal activity.
But here's the thing. It's not just what's going on inside your head. The world around you plays a massive role. For a theory like this to really catch fire and spread, the conditions have to be just right. The social soil has to be fertile. And boy, in the late 1960s, it really, really was. Just look at the timeline. It's like a perfect storm. In '66, the Beatles quit touring, basically vanishing from the public eye. Paul also has a real, but very minor, moped accident. Then by 1969, society is just in turmoil. There's deep distrust of the establishment over the Vietnam War. College campuses are these hotbeds of protest and suspicion. It was the absolute perfect breeding ground for a theory about a massive high-level cover-up.
And this quote from Tim Harper just says it all. He was one of the student journalists who first wrote about the theory and got it out there, and he perfectly captures that mood. The thinking was, hey, if the government is lying to us about a war, what else are they hiding?
Psychologists have a word for this feeling. It's called anomie. It's that sense of being disconnected, like you're an outsider and your values just don't line up with the rest of society. And studies show a major link here. People who feel this sense of anomie are much more likely to believe in conspiracies. And it makes sense, right? If you feel like the system has left you behind, you're probably going to be more likely to believe that system is up to no good.
And this all leads to a really critical insight. Feeling powerless is an incredibly strong motivator. When people feel like they don't have control over their own lives, their brains kick into overdrive trying to find patterns, any patterns, to make the world feel like it makes sense again. And weirdly enough, even a scary conspiracy can feel more comforting than believing that the world is just random and chaotic. A conspiracy, at least, is an explanation. It gives you a sense of order.
So finally, let's just look at the stories themselves. Because let's be honest, for a conspiracy theory to really stick around, it has to be a good story. It needs to have all the right ingredients to make it compelling, to make it irresistible.
So what are those ingredients? Well, first, it has to explain something really big and important. Check, the death of a beetle. Second, it has to point the finger at powerful people doing bad things. Check, the other beetles and their whole operation. Third, it needs a clear motive. Check, they wanted to protect the band and spare the public's feelings. And fourth, it helps if it has some weird, unusual stuff going on. Double check, backwards messages and hidden clues in photos. The Paul is dead theory had it all.
And here's one of the most mind-bending findings from all the research. Believing in one conspiracy theory is one of the best predictors that you'll believe in others, even if those theories completely contradict each other. It's what's called a monological belief system. It suggests that for some, it's not really about the specific details of any one theory. It's more about the worldview, the core belief that nothing is as it seems, and that powerful people are always pulling the strings behind the scenes.
So, okay, why spend all this time on a 50-year-old rumor about a rock band? Because the exact same psychological forces that drove the Paul is dead craze are, if anything, even more powerful and relevant today in our modern world.
The researchers who've studied this stuff for years put it perfectly. It's really easy to just laugh off a theory about a dead beetle as harmless fun. But when you take that exact same psychology, that same mistrust, that same need for control, that same pattern seeking, and you apply it to things like science, medicine, or politics, well, the consequences can be incredibly serious. It stops being fun and games pretty fast.
Which really leaves all of us with a huge question to think about. Our brains are literally wired to connect dots, to find patterns, and to tell stories to make sense of a really confusing world. And most of the time, that's a good thing. But in our age of endless information and, let's face it, endless misinformation, the challenge for every single one of us is to figure out when that incredible pattern-matching machine in our head is helping us and when it might just be leading us astray.